Good morning. It is good to see all of you here. I don't know a lot of you, but that's okay. I have felt the Spirit of God here. I've been blessed by being here already. So as was mentioned, Elizabeth Lloyd is helping us out in the things we do. And I just want to publicly say thank you for sharing her with us. To the Lloyd family especially, to the rest of you. She continues to be a tremendous blessing to us. Now, I told my wife this morning, I said, I feel really accountable. Andrew has been out and visited us, and Elizabeth said she's going to be watching me. So if I say anything wrong, you'll hear about it. I do live in Sacramento, California. I love living there. I love living in the city. I've enjoyed the city for quite a few years. I've been in California for the last about 18 years. I love the busyness of the city. I love the opportunities the city brings. There's so many people, so many opportunities. But you know, like a lot of us, we don't begin saying we know where we're going to be 10 years from now. Well, the same goes for us. When we started Streetlight Christian Ministries, we never dreamed that it would be what it is today. And we continue to learn and to follow God and try hard to be faithful in the things He calls us to. So a lot of people ask, well, what is Streetlight Christian Ministries? Well, we say it's an Anabaptist urban ministry promoting life skills and biblical discipleship. Well, I realize that people can look at that and say, well, life skills, that's kind of broad. Biblical discipleship might be the same. Well, we do that through Kids Club, through a community garden, through fruit giveaway, through life skills classes, children's tutoring, English, ESL classes, children's Bible classes, and adult Bible study. We have a lot of things that we do to help our community as much as we can. So this red line here is drawn around the apartment complex that Rosanna and I live in. There's about 2,000 people that live inside that red line. You see the white arrow there is the building that we live in. The apartment, that's the building where the apartment is that we live in. So that inside that red line is about 33 acres. So if you can imagine 33 acres with over 2,000 people living there. It's a lot of people. So how does that compare to here? When I go somewhere and speak, I'm always interested in how does where I am compare to where I live? So I asked Andrew last evening, I said, what's the zip code here? The 17540 zip code, where we are right now, has 500 people per square mile. And I speak in a lot of churches where it's 20, 30, 40 people per square mile. So you're doing pretty well. Interestingly enough, the zip code I live in, the 95842 zip code, has almost 8,000 people per square mile. So you can see there's a bit of a difference where I live and where you live. But I've found something that is the same. We all have neighbors. We all have neighbors. No matter, I tell people it's easier for me to learn to know my neighbors because I just learned to know them on the sidewalk. Where for some of you, you have to drive out the lane, drive over to the neighbor's lane, drive in, look around for the dog, go knock on the door. It takes work for you. It's easy for me. I get to meet them just as it happens. That's part of what I love about living in the city. Not so long ago, I was talking with my son about New York City. I was reading somewhere how many people you would have to meet every day for 100 years if you were going to meet everybody in New York City. So I sat down and did a little bit of figuring. And this is rough figuring. But I figured if I meet 5 new people every day, 365 days a year, I'm probably still barely keeping up with the people in this one apartment complex. Because apartment complexes are very much of a revolving door. People move in, people move out, people move in, people move out. The idea of the family farm, it's gone where I live. Well, not only this, but if you can imagine, right down here, there's another apartment complex. Right over here, there's another apartment complex. Just around the corner, around every corner, it seems like, there's apartment complexes. So there's lots and lots of people who I get to talk with and I get to show God's love to. So I have a question for you. Why do you do what you do? Something I've pondered, especially as, interestingly enough, I very much enjoyed the Sunday school time because those verses, the story of the king giving money to his workers and saying, invest it well, use it well while I'm gone, has challenged me over and over again and has made me consider this. Why do you do what you do? Why do I do what I do? I believe I do what I do because it's my job as a steward. God has given us, He's given me so much that it's a shame to just bury it. It needs to be invested. I have this verse on the wall behind my desk in my office. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. Well, maybe along with that then, you might also ask, if you believe that you are a steward, how has being a steward changed you? When you begin to understand that you're a steward, everything you have, God has given you. How does that change you? How does God change how I do things? Or does God change how I do things? 1 Corinthians 10:31, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. I'm challenged by this verse because it says very simple things. It doesn't say, so when you go on a huge mission trip halfway around the world, there, what you do matters. God actually says, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it to the glory of God. One of the things that I've worked on for myself is learning to leverage my strengths. I'm just about as normal as the rest of you. I have strengths and I have weaknesses. There are things that I'm good at. There are things that I'm not. But I'm trying to learn to leverage my strengths. What are you good at? I believe that those things so often are talents God has given you. One of the things that blesses me so much as I go to a lot of different places is children. I love the number of children that are here. Children are really part of the fabric of a lot of our lives. That's a strength that you bring. Most of the youth here are used to working with children, seeing children, being around them. That's not necessarily normal in our world today. But that's a strength that we have, a lot of us have in our culture. Leverage that strength. You can work with children. Not everyone enjoys cooking, but some do. My neighbors wouldn't be impressed with my cooking, but they like my wife's cooking. I can line them down the sidewalk waiting for my wife's chocolate chip cookies. See, that's a strength that she has. How can we use it well? A lot of us have learned something of living simply, living thriftily. That's a strength that we have. It allows us to live in a lot of places where a lot of other people struggle to live. California is not the cheapest place to live. There's a reason that my neighbors knock on our door and say, Miss Rosanna, can you sew these patches on my biker jacket? Why do they ask her that? You see, there's a strength here. My neighbors can't believe when I help them jump start their car. They're like, how do you know how to do this? Well, I don't know. I grew up on a farm. See, it's a strength I was given. Use those strengths. Now, you don't necessarily all have the same that I have. But I believe that God has given each one of us strengths. I would call them talents. God has given us talents. And then he said, okay, here you go. Now use them. How are you going to use them? And when we read in the Bible, we read that God says, in the story we had today, you can either invest them or you can bury them. Which one are you doing? You have the opportunity to invest and say, God gave me something. I want to share it with you. God gave me something. Here, have some. Or I have the option of going out and building a wall around it and saying, I got to protect this thing because God gave it to me, I got to protect it. And if we think about it long enough, we might be able to convince ourselves that either one is a good approach. But when we read the rest of the story, we realize that God rather strongly favors the one over the other. So I want to give you a tour of Logan Park Apartments. That's where I live. It's low-income housing. When we first moved in there, a lot of African Americans. By the way, just a plug for Sacramento. Beautiful weather. We get frost maybe 6 times a year. You know, I've seen snow flurries twice in the 18 years I've been there. In the summer it gets a little warm, but it's lovely. I really would recommend Sacramento. One of the things that's interesting about Sacramento is if you take the whole surrounding area, like the metro area, it's about 2 million people. So it's not huge, but it's not tiny. The interesting thing is we have lots of room around us, lots of rice fields. So a lot of places, they don't build that high. They tend to spread out. So that most of the apartment buildings where we live are about 2-story. Lots of parks, lots of things like that. At any given time, I can take a pitcher of juice down here to the playground after school and surround myself with children. God blessed us with this space that we rent that has been a huge blessing for us. The German Baptist group not so far from us came up and helped us do a lot of work, a lot of renovation on it, and today the Lamppost Learning Center is in that space. This is where Elizabeth spends a lot of her time. This is our board. Byron and Bonnie Miller are not on our board, but we call them our staff grandparents. He's a licensed family and marriage therapist, and he's somebody I can call and say, Byron, I'm wrestling with this thing. Just listen to me for a while. Help me to know how to think through this. It's been such a blessing to us. And of course, most of you know Miss Elizabeth. Miss Clarissa is another teacher from Missouri who has been helping us. So people ask us, well, how do you start? Well, you know, the way we started is just learning to know our neighbors. So we live here. Directly above us are our neighbors. Well, right over here is another door. They're our neighbors too. Catty corner from us are our neighbors too. And then if you walk out here, out to the sidewalk, just across here is another apartment building. These are our neighbors too. And just over here is another building. These are our neighbors too. And just over here. And it goes on and on and on. They're our neighbors. So when we wanted to start, when Rosanna and I got married, I told her the city is important to me. By that point, I was fairly certain I was called to the city. So we moved into this apartment complex in Sacramento, knocked on our neighbor's door, and said, "Hey, we'd like to invite you over for dinner." It's an African-American lady with 3 children. They came over, and after dinner, I said, "Do you guys know how to play Monopoly?" "Oh, yeah." So we played Monopoly, and when they left for the evening, at the end of the evening, I said, "So now, come over tomorrow evening after school, and if I'm home and I have time, I'll play games with you." And they did. And I told them, I said, "You know, more than 4 people can play Monopoly. Do you have any friends who enjoy that game?" And they invited their friends. And their friends invited their friends. So eventually we said, well, we want to start doing something special. We want you to come over after school. But on Saturdays at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we want to start doing something, a craft project together. So especially come at that time. Well, you can imagine Larry here becomes my salesman. When he walks out my door and walks down the sidewalk, the first child he sees, what do they ask him? "Where'd you get that?" "I want one." And he says, "Well, it's just over here." So that child's going to come and knock on my door. And you know, it's amazing. We as adults think that we have a network. We know how to communicate and, get answers. The children got us beat. They have a network to spread things. So how many people can you fit in a 1-bedroom apartment? There does come a limit. I don't think it's always the same. For us, the last time we did Kids Club in our apartment, we had 19 children. And we made dolls putting rice into socks. And I picked up rice for a long time after that. And I realized that something's going to have to change. We were having a great time. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. But you can't always keep doing what you're doing when you run out of things. What do you do? Well, there's a community building in Logan Park there that's called the Life Center. And I had met the pastor who was in charge of the Life Center. So I called her, explained to her what we've been doing, and she got all excited. She said, "Oh, this is perfect. This is just what we've dreamed of doing. Please, you come down. You can sign your name. That'll put you on our insurance. We'll give you keys. Saturdays, the building's yours." You know, sometimes I think when it comes to California, everything runs on red tape. This building has been such a blessing to us. God just so opened the doors in so many ways. Until COVID, we used this building every single Saturday. And on any Saturday, you might see this many people waiting outside the door, or you might see 5 times this many. Well, when you put your mind to it, there's a lot of things you can do with kids. How many of you have made ice cream in a Ziploc bag? Wow, not very many of you. You should all experience that sometime in your life. It's great. Absolutely great. So you take the ingredients for ice cream, you put them in a Ziploc bag, zip it shut. Throw that into a bigger Ziploc bag and put salt and ice in there. And then you just shake it. And as the salt and ice mix, it creates a low enough temperature to freeze your ice cream ingredients. It's so much fun. The kids are like, "Oh, look at that, Mr. Lavern, it's getting hard. What's happening?" And then I get a chance to sit down with them and tell them Bible stories and ask them how their summer's going and ask them what's going on in their lives. I love telling Bible stories. I love the opportunities. We get a chance to sing together. We get a chance to sit down and have a snack together. We get a chance to interact with them. Well, it's interesting. As you learn to know the children, then you learn to know the parents. As you learn to know the parents, you learn to know the problems. As you learn to know the problems, you begin to have opportunity to speak into things that are near and dear to their lives. I never dreamed I would do a garden where I live. My mom had a garden when I was growing up, but it didn't mean a lot to me. When I left home, that wasn't a big deal for me. Got a phone call from the director of the Life Center, and she said, "Do you know how to garden?" See, here's another talent coming up. I said, "Well, I know what it is. I know something about it. My mom had a garden." She said, "You seem like the type who would know how to garden." Why'd she say that? I know, you laugh. She said, "I've looked everywhere in our organization. I've never been able to find someone who knows how to garden. I must be a rare breed." So she said, "Would you go down and talk to the apartment complex manager? He wants a garden. And I can't do it for him because I don't know anybody who knows how to garden." So I walked into the office and said, "Hey, so Mr. Warren, what's up with this garden?" He said, "If I pay you, would you do a garden for me?" I said, "Probably. Like, what do you have in mind?" He said, "I'll pay for any materials that you need. You tell me what you need, we'll make it happen." He said, "I grew up in an apartment complex that had a garden, a community garden, and I always dreamed of doing that here, but I could never find someone who knows how to garden." You know, where I grew up, they were a dime a dozen. But you know, these kinds of things happen when you put yourself out there and are willing to do what God brings to you. Soon after we got married, we spent time praying and asking God, telling him we are willing. We want to help the community where we live. We want to do what we can. And you know, I think sometimes God took that prayer more seriously than we did. The garden is a lot of fun. Fruit. So when we started doing Kids Club at the Life Center, we told the children, we said, "We don't want you to stop coming to our house during the week. Yes, we can't all fit in here at once, but you keep coming over." Then we started having children of our own, and I realized we're going to have to start making boundaries here. We can't it doesn't work to just have a door that's just always open. It's just, whew. So I told them, I said, "You come over after school, and if I have fruit, I'll give you fruit." So they did. And then sometimes their mom came along. And then sometimes other people came along. And you know, it's amazing. On a beautiful day, we might give out fruit to 150 people in a day as they come through. But you know, I've realized something. This place right here on my patio is a great place to solve my problems. You know, if I have a problem with one of the children at Kids Club, you know, when I'm a little bit frustrated with this kid who's acting out, and he's a little frustrated at me, and he's got all his peers around him watching what's going to happen. This is going to be fun. Watch what Mr. Lavern does. Well, it's a little bit hard to solve the problem there because it can get a little bit hot. But you know, when the next day I'm giving out fruit and he comes by himself, oh, then I can pull him aside and say, "So, Michael, how are we going to get along? What do you wish I would do different? What's something you could do different? How are we going to get along?" You know, I solve an amazing amount of problems when I get a chance to talk with them one-on-one and listen to them. And my doorbell probably gets about as much use in a day as some people's does in a year, or at least a month. Sometimes when fruit goes on sale, you just have to do what you have to do. Whoops. So we had a group of girls who came over and said, "Miss Rosanna, you make the best food. Can you teach us how to make food like you do?" Well, see, here's another talent. Here's another thing a strong point, a strength we've been given. Well, what can you teach a group of girls who want to learn how to cook? you can teach them an amazing amount of things. Besides the food, you have an opportunity to fix something like this. This is all made out of Play-Doh. And you can ask them, okay, is this a balanced meal? What do you think? Is this what you recommend for your family every day? No. Well, what would you make? What would you change? What needs to change to make this better?
More burgers.
Huh? You're my kind of guy. And then you have the opportunity to give them the actual ingredients and say, okay, so now make it. And you have the opportunity to say, okay, if you're making a salad, what colors look nice in a salad? You know, I'm not a big salad eater, but I've seen a few that I said, now those are good looking salads, even though I don't want to eat them, they still look good. You know, the other wonderful thing about cooking class is that at the end, they have to come to my house and take a recipe and do it completely by themselves. And I get to taste test. How cool is that? The end of cooking class, we always have a banquet for the girls and their families. And that's a lot of fun. You get to sit down with a lot of the parents and talk to them about a variety of things. One of the things I try hard to tell them is, look, your daughter helped make this food. When you go home, have her make this for you. And if you need some extra flour or sugar, come knock on my door. I'll help you out. Your daughter can do things. Your daughter has abilities. Well, you can imagine the next day, these girls are going to knock on my door saying, Miss Rosanna, what else do you know how to do? What else can you teach us how to do? You know, when you sit down on the floor with a group of people, it's amazing the questions that come out when you're just working together with something like this. So interesting to hear what they're thinking. If you've never taught a 10-year-old how to hammer a nail, you should. It's more challenging than you might think if you've never, ever touched a hammer in your life. You know, for years it bothered me. So I have a background in teaching. I taught in a Christian school for 5 years. I've taught part-time in the public school. It bothered me for years how many of our neighbors didn't know how to read and write. You know, when you have a fourth grader who doesn't know how to read or write, what are their chances of ever being off welfare? What are their chances of really leading a good, productive life? And I kept telling our board, I said, I don't know what to do, but it bothers me. We need to do something. And I finally said, I'm just going to start sitting down with some of these children and working with them. It's been very interesting. Well, about that time was when the situation in Afghanistan began to become more unstable, and the United States started letting more and more people from Afghanistan into the United States. And all of a sudden, here we have Afghanis showing up on our doorstep. And we realized pretty quickly that not only can we teach them one-on-one, we can do classes, because there's a lot of them who need to learn how to speak English. It's really where it needs to start. And then also learning how to read English. You know, it was interesting when we started working with some of the Afghani children. The next thing we knew, some of the fathers came to us. So the fathers, a lot of them had worked for the U.S. military over there, so they spoke varying degrees of decent English. But their wives knew nothing. They came to us and said, you're teaching our children. Would you teach our wives how to speak English? I had never thought of that. So we had a girl from Kansas who was helping us during that time, and I asked her, I said, is this something that you think you'd like to try? And she said, I would. I think it would be interesting. So we started teaching English, and that's a large part, a very large part of what Elizabeth does right now. Elizabeth and Clarissa both, really. Well, you know, not everything is perfect. We started on the floor of an apartment because we had rented the space, but we weren't finished with renovations. The interesting thing is, I want to point this out. We saw this as a bad thing. Having to meet, you know, either they come over to an apartment or we go to their apartment. We saw that as a complication. But you know, today, even today, the teachers spend a lot of time in their homes. That wouldn't happen today if it hadn't started here. An inconvenience here opened the door to tremendous possibilities later. So sometimes when we say we have this difficulty, maybe it's actually a good thing. Well, as word spread among the Afghanis that we teach English, all of a sudden, there were a lot of students who were interested in learning English. At the beginning, we started with 4 students, and they knew nobody. They knew nothing. Hardly knew how to write their name in English. See, in Farsi, you write the opposite direction. There's a lot of different things. You start from the back of the book and go to the front. Or maybe we start in the back. I'm not sure which. But there's a lot of things, you know, you almost have to start as simple as here's how you hold your pencil. Because some of them didn't even know how to read and write in their own language before they came here. So you have to start extremely simple. We do babysitting. We offer babysitting for children while their moms are in class. That's been very interesting. Well, you can imagine when you start doing something like that, and especially, you know how chaotic the close of the United States military's time in Afghanistan was, and all of a sudden all these people are coming in. Well, here you go. And we haven't even scratched the surface, if you like. There's so many more people. So on Monday and Tuesday, we have class for these ladies. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, the teacher goes to their home for an hour. And it's been an amazing way of building individual relationships. Children's Bible class. So one of the reasons we rented the space that we're using is because the Life Center where we started doing Kids Club, they were okay with Kids Club. They said, well, yeah, you can tell Bible stories. But when I went to them and asked about Bible class, they said, no, you can teach them English, you can teach them math, but no, this Bible thing's going too far. That's when I said, well, I think I need to find my own space because I'm not okay with that. We have Bible class every Wednesday afternoon for children aged 9 and up to sit down and talk about what does the Bible say? What can we learn from this Bible story? Every Sunday afternoon we have an adult Bible study for anyone who's interested. You know, there's not a lot of people who come, just a few, usually a few ladies. It's been very interesting to sit down with them and learn to know who they are and what they want to do in their life. And you know, I'll tell you, when you are there ready to sit down with them and say, how can I help you? What can I pray with you about? What's going on in your life? One of the ladies told us, she said, if I don't come to Sunday afternoon Bible study, you need to come knock on my door. Because she said, it's probably because I'm depressed. But she said, you help me so much. Well, I don't feel like I'm doing that great. But you know, God has a way of using us in a lot of different things. Yes, during COVID, we even met in the park. So I've told you a lot of different things that we do And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about individual people. Because you know, sometimes if you're not careful, you see what's happening without actually seeing that there's an individual at each one of these places. So Amorion comes bouncing into tutoring class one day. Sat down, and as soon as he sat down, he asked one of the teachers, he said, "So, do homosexuals go to hell?" Well, what do you think? Do they? We believe it's wrong. I'm assuming you believe it's wrong. You know? But I have an opportunity to tell Amorion, you know, God loves your mom who's in a lesbian relationship. And your mom doesn't have to go to hell. This isn't a done deal. You know, God loves your mom. God loves you. He cares about you. And there is repentance. For years, Kyrie came to Kids Club with this talent shirt, and I kept telling him, "Kyrie, this thing's it's just not fitting very well anymore." So then he showed up in his yellow shirt, and I said, "Kyrie, that's just about as good as your talent shirt. I like it a lot." Well, you can imagine that food ranks fairly highly in this man's life. It's been a lot of fun. But you know, he lives with his brother and his mom. His mom was in a car accident and is in a wheelchair now, can no longer walk. Think about what that does for Kyrie's life. How that changes everything. You know, the interesting thing is Kyrie enjoys gardening. And they grow tomatoes on their patio. So I get a chance when I see Kyrie, I can say, "Hey, how are your tomatoes doing?" And I can compare my tomatoes from the community garden to his tomatoes that he grew on his patio. It's so much fun. You know, there's that connection that you learn to have with these people. We're going to call this man Noman. So Noman grew up in Afghanistan. I sat down. He was in an English class we had. I sat down with him one day and I said, "Noman, I just want to ask you some questions." I said, what was it like living in Afghanistan? Did you feel safe most of the time? He said, growing up, I grew up during a time when there were 4 different groups that were fighting for control of Afghanistan. He said, when I went to school, I never knew when I'd come back if my house would still be there. Because he said bombs fell randomly on any houses in the community, you never knew. Well, Noman grew up and eventually worked for the government over there, the government that the U.S. helped set up. But he said, I didn't take my government-issued car to work very often because he said it wasn't safe. He said multiple of my coworkers were killed from car bombs. So he said, I'd take a taxi to work and we'd go this way to work, go a completely different way back from work. Now imagine what that would be like. I told him, I said, I can't comprehend that. I've lived in safety my whole life. Imagine how that would change your life. So I said, Noman, what do you enjoy doing here in the United States? He said, one of the things I really like to do is go for a walk. Because he said, I can here. In Afghanistan, I couldn't because it wasn't safe. We had a Valentine's Day party this year for the ladies who are in English class. And that's always a lot of fun. It always starts late. They always bring tons of food, all kinds of different food. And then they insist that the teachers go first. Oh, you must go. And here, you need to try some of this and try. And, you know, they're such a hospitable culture. We've learned to enjoy the Afghanis, their food, their culture. There's so many things that I love about the Muslim people. I've also learned that when you learn to know them, on the front, a lot of things look good. I appreciate their family values. I appreciate their hospitality. I appreciate their value of children. But you know, when you work with them long enough and you start going around the back, then you start realizing things aren't always as pretty as they look. So just about maybe 3 weeks ago, Elizabeth was tutoring in one of her students' homes. She was sitting down with the wife, talking about English, and the Afghani lady's husband was talking on the phone, and so eventually he went outside, and so Elizabeth's student gets up and goes to the window and looks out to make sure that he's gone. And then she sits down and she starts crying. And Elizabeth's like, well, what's wrong? What's going on? And she told her, she said, she very broken English. But in the English she said, I'm very sad because my husband is on the phone with his caseworker trying to bring his second wife over to the United States. And she said, I can't let my husband see me cry, but I'm very sad. Well, you know, we've gotten used to a lot of things like divorce and remarriage and even, fornication. We're not used to these things. I can't fix that, and it depends which side you want to look at for who you feel bad for. I feel bad for the second wife that's living in Afghanistan. And yet to bring her over is not necessarily the answer either. I can't fix those things. I can't just go in and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. But Elizabeth had an opportunity that day to show love to someone that God loves. Another one of the teachers who does some tutoring on the side was in one of the ladies' homes, and this lady is pregnant. She's already had 7 girls, and everyone is fervently praying that this new baby will be a boy, because her husband told her, if you can't have boys, then I'm going to go find somebody who can. Right now, he has a girlfriend in Afghanistan. You see, there's those things that happen in a Muslim culture. But we have opportunities there to show them the love of Jesus and to show them another way. There are people, we love you, we care about you, but not just us. God loves you infinitely more than we can. One of the things that I love about teaching English, especially teaching speaking English, is if you can figure out how to play games, you can figure out how to teach them even faster. It's a lot of fun. You take some of these ladies who didn't know anything about reading and writing, and you start teaching them different words. You have to realize that some words, like the word the, you will never learn how to sound that word out. It doesn't work. You have to memorize the word. So then you can take a whole bunch of words that they've memorized and say, give them a word. Okay, who can point to it fastest? It's a lot of fun. The men's class that I was working with found out that I grew up on a dairy farm. They said, we want to see a dairy farm in the United States. So I took them to a dairy farm that had robotic milkers. And I think I had as much fun as they did. But they loved it. They were just, when we left, I asked them, I said, so what do you think? You think you'd like to come work on a farm? And one guy, very broken English, he says, I like the country. Not so much people, good. But farm stinks so much. And I agreed with him. How many of you grew up praying for the 1040 window? That's something that I remember praying for. It's amazing if you look at what God has done in the last, say, 10, 12 years in the 1040 window. So many of these countries are open that weren't. But not only that, God's bringing these people to us. I believe that God's answer to my prayers for the 1040 window was to put an Afghani family right beside me and say, okay, now what you going to do now? I did my part. And he's right. I think it's a shame if we don't do our part when we pray for these things. I can't fix all the wrongs in this world. But I do have opportunity to tell Bible stories, to show love to them, and to help show them a God who cares. There are newsletters in the back. Feel free to pick those up. There's also a sign-up sheet if you'd like to sign up for newsletters. Please put either your physical address or your email address. There's prayer cards. One of the things that I've struggled with is when I know 400 children, how do I pray for them all? So what I've started doing is when I go places, I take prayer cards along, pictures of the kids. Feel free to pick those up, take them home, put them on your fridge. Pray for these kids. And there's candy back there. You know, we've all got a part of our heart that's still a kid, don't we? Feel free to pick it up. We are currently looking for another lady teacher to help next year in teaching these Afghani ladies. If that's something that you would be interested in, or you know someone who you think would do well with that, please talk to us. We'd be glad to talk with you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing Elizabeth with us. Thank you for caring about your neighbors. See, I try my best to care about my neighbors. We all have neighbors. Can I answer any questions? Either I bored you, or I explained it a little plenty well, or I'm not sure what.
Did a great job, Lavern.
Thank you again. May God bless you.